Today, the Nintendo Gamecube has a reputation for being one of the all-time greatest Nintendo consoles, and it is very easy to forget that it was not at all popular when it first came out. All of these Nintendo games were downright downplayed and ignored in favor of hyping up overrated slop like Halo and Grand Theft Auto. It's very, very telling how, these days, people look back more fondly on the GameCube and not on these supposed generation-defining masterpieces. We are, of course, seeing this happen now real time with the Switch as well, but the GameCube is a console that was very formative for me. You know, some of my favorite games ever are on this thing, even though it's not necessarily my favorite Nintendo platform. So as a result of that, I thought I would take a look back at my 10 personal favorite Nintendo GameCube games. Let us explore just how amazing this console actually is. Kicking off my list at number 10, we have the original Metroid Prime. Now, of course, this has gone on to be regarded as one of the greatest games of all time, one of the most critically acclaimed games ever made, and like an all-time classic of the 2000s. But at the time, this was written off because it wasn't enough like Halo. You know, I knew so many people who would scream at you because this game didn't have multiplayer and it didn't have any Space Marines. And what do you mean you have to think about puzzles and you have to think about where to go next? You know, this was a very alienating game for a lot of casual players. And over time, it started garnering a following and started becoming very, very popular to the point where it is now kind of put on a pedestal and worshipped as one of the all-time Nintendo classics. And I don't exactly agree with that. There's no denying that this is a very great game, but it is nowhere near the level of quality as something like Super Metroid or perhaps even something more modern like Metroid Dread. But this is a game that I have come to appreciate and love a lot more over time. The environmental art is some of the best I've ever seen in any game ever. You know, the pacing is great. The music is fantastic. There's really nothing quite like the immersion in this game. It really does have a very unique vibe to it, one that is completely unmatched even by future Metroid Prime games. And as a result of that, this has over time, establishes itself as one of my favorite GameCube games.
Doubting.
At number 9, we have my all-time favorite horror game, Eternal Darkness. A game that I think a lot of people would see as being kind of clunky and unintuitive, but it's something that I think really stands out, even today in the horror genre. It manages to perfectly capture the Lovecraftian vibe of cosmic horror in the video game format, in which you play as several characters over a variety of historical periods as you try and uncover the mystery of just how to stop your invading ancient. And the game really, really impresses with its unique sense of style, with its tone, with its presentations, with some very unique creative decisions, like during the present era, for a good chunk of the game, you never actually see anything all that scary. You have the vibe, you have like the tone, but it is very, very uncommon for you to see anything in the present time, which means that the game slowly over its runtime gives you this unique feeling of dread, of something terrible happening. These segments are, of course, like interspersed with actual segmented levels in which you go back to the past and get to know a lot of these characters. And all of them have horrible, horrible, horrible fates. And all of it just slowly builds up to an iconic, unique climax. This is, I think, the best use of cosmic horror in any video game ever. And even today, I look back on this game very, very fondly. And I hope someday that we get a proper re-release on Nintendo Classic. At number 8, we have one of my all-time favorite fighting games, Soul Calibur 2. A unique historical fantasy fighting game in which a bunch of different characters with a bunch of different weapons fight each other in a 3D combat space. Even today, the game is fast-paced, it's hectic, it has a lot of variety, there's a ton of content, and it looks stunning. Like, I was kind of surprised when I was playing this on Nintendo Classics earlier this year because in a lot of ways, I think this still looks and plays better than the most recent entry, Soul Calibur 6. You know, the characters have their unique art style, they have personality, they have all this soul put into their presentation, into the voice acting. Like, it just sticks out to me as this very standout fighting game from the 2000s. And it's a shame that we never got like any real sequels because, you know, this was the high point of the series and there was a pretty quick decline after this. But like, the fact of the matter is this is one of the all-time great fighting games, and it's something that I really, really, really hope gets some kind of follow-up on Nintendo consoles. This is something I would really like to see more of, and I hope the re-release on Nintendo Classics like incentivizes the creators and Nintendo to produce something more with this series, because this has endured as my go-to Nintendo GameCube fighting game for decades, and I don't think that's ever going to change. At number 7, we have Killer 7, one of the most interesting, engaging, unique video games ever created. This incredible political drama follows an assassin with multiple personalities as he goes about his missions for the United States government, you know, trying to put a stop to the supernatural terrorist group Heaven Smile, led by the illustrious Kun Lan. It is one of the most profound, complex, convoluted plots in video game history. Like, this is something you have to study to understand. It is bizarre how much this game throws at you and just expects you to accept. But at the same time, the more you play this game and the more you understand it, the more you realize it is very much grounded in its own unique logic. A lot of people, even Suda51 himself, consider this his all-time magnum opus. I personally disagree. I prefer the original No More Heroes. But there is no denying that Killer 7 is an instrumental part of any GameCube enthusiast library. This is a game that is very much unlike anything else you will ever play in your life. And it is something that I wish more people would play and discover.
You don't want to go any further. It's dangerous. My friends are all dead. They were all murdered by people that look like this. I have been chosen.
Oh, shit. There's more than 14. Those bastards are breeding.
At number 6, we have, of course, the iconic Resident Evil 4, considered by many to be the greatest game of all time, although they neglect to mention this was a GameCube exclusive. This was a very pivotal game for video games in which Nintendo developed a game that kind of redefined the third-person action game. Every third-person shooter you have played over the past 20 years took a lot of influence from RE4 when it comes to the camera angles, when it came to the tone, when it came to the style. You know, this game was a massive innovator when it came to the next 20 years of, particularly Western-developed games. And it's a shame that Nintendo's involvement in this project has been downplayed and ignored over the years, but this is something that really could have only been possible on the GameCube. The features, the style, the tone, the presentation, all of it is just classic Nintendo goodness. And this is a pivotal example of just how Nintendo dominates in this genre. This was very much the golden eye of its time. It's so much more sophisticated and evolved than anything else that anybody on the other consoles were doing at the time. And yet the narrative persisted for decades that games like this simply didn't exist on Nintendo hardware. As far as I'm concerned, this is the game that kind of definitively not only proved that that was true, but that also that people were so delusional about the meme that Nintendo only produces games for children that they would blatantly lie about something that's very, very self-evident right in front of their faces. Like, this is an absolute masterpiece of a game and has endured as like the all-time classic of the Resident Evil formula to the point where it mogs the remake visually and still remains a better game than it. Like, this is an all-time classic that far surpasses any of the inferior ports on PlayStation or other platforms. Like, the Nintendo GameCube and Nintendo Wii versions still remain the best version of Resident Evil 4. All right, we have my most played GameCube game in recent years, Pikmin 1. I actually seriously thought about putting this one a little bit higher because of my history with this game. I bought it when I was very, very young, too young to play it, and so I struggled with it for a long time before finally beating it, and only recently have I gone back, kind of endlessly playing and replaying it, trying to get better at it, trying to get to the point where I can do a 6-day cycle and a 6-day playthrough and like improving my skills. And like, I've been stonewalled several times, and it's been like some of the most fun I've had with any game in recent years. And it's very, very interesting looking back on this because, the criticisms that people have about this game, that it's way too short and way too easy once you know what you're doing, are completely valid. And yet at the same time, this is a completely unique, fresh Nintendo IP that kind of defined itself as being the GameCube's new thing. In fact, for a long time, a lot of people argued that this was Nintendo's last new IP ever. And obviously that's a load of crap, especially now that we live in a post-Splatoon world and a post-ARMS world, and we see like new IPs out of Nintendo all the time. But for a long period of time, one of the big like conspiracies among people was that this was the last original IP that Nintendo ever made. And obviously that's not true, but the simple fact of the matter is that this game left an impact on people due to its creativity, due to its presentation, due to like how being very much unlike any other game out there. It definitely deserves a lot of props for being so unique and fresh and exciting. And it is a shame that this still remains the best Pikmin game. I feel like none of the sequels have really captured what I personally really love about the original, but hopefully in the future, Nintendo is able to come up with something that kind of it evolves the formula and makes it like fun and exciting. This is definitely something I want to see become a bigger IP for them, and it certainly has grown quite a lot since Pikmin 4, but this is a game that is very, very special to me, and I hope we get a sequel deserving of the original in the very near future. Or we have Super Smash Bros. Melee. Now, for most lists, this would probably be at number 1, but for me personally, I can't get over the fact that after I completely 100% of the game in 2018, that I've never really gone back to this one. There's just, to me, I feel like modern Smash games have kind of made this one obsolete. It is showing its age. It is showing its lack of characters. It just feels so outdated. But at the same time, playing this when it was brand new was a magical experience. All that Nintendo history, all that lore, all these different characters, these amazing stages, the trophy system in which you could learn more about Nintendo's obscure history, it was a magical experience and remains the gold standard, I think, for what Super Smash Bros. Should be. I have never been more excited to play a Super Smash Bros. Game than this one, and it remains an all-time classic that should be celebrated. At some point, I'm sure it's going to come to Nintendo Classics, and when it does, I'm sure it is once again going to surge in popularity because it is genuinely a great. I first played Super Monkey Ball a couple of years back, around 2020 or so, and it very quickly became one of my all-time favorites. This is a video game at its core. This thing is brutal. This thing will have you playing over and over again, trying to clear it, improve your skills, get to the level that you need to do to win, and it constantly demands more of you. This is a very much arcade-like experience, and I would argue it's the greatest arcade experience I've ever had on a console. It's so much fun to play. It's so hardcore. There's so much going on. The stages are all phenomenal. Like I love the recent releases of Monkey Ball, but to this day, I still think of this as my all-time favorite because this game has something very, very special that really makes you want to come back and keep trying to beat it. It is an addicting experience and was something that I desperately wish I had discovered when I was young. At the number 2 spot, we have, of course, my all-time favorite RPG, Baten Kaitos Origins. Now, I actually recently played through this game again on stream, and I was kind of surprised at just how well paced it is, how good the story is, how amazing the bosses are. Like, there are some things you can complain about, like, you know, like the padding at the end is a really good example, but that's pretty standard for JRPGs, right? Like, all in all, this remains one of my all-time favorite games because it has everything I personally look for in an RPG. It has a unique setting, unforgettable characters, amazing encounters, like a very unique theme that doesn't really make itself out to be more than it is. Like, this is a very well-written, engaging game throughout its entire runtime, and this day, I feel like it has some of the best plot twists I've seen in any game ever. It's just phenomenal how well executed the twists are and just what it means for the characters. I was like very, very moved seeing some of these things again, you know, even after all this time and knowing all the twists. And I do think that's the main issue I have with this game, going back to it, is that it's not really that replayable. Like, it's so twist focused that it's very easy to feel like when you know what the twist is that like some of them are kind of contrived, you know, like who the real final antagonist is and some of the things that happen. It's just like in the heat of the moment it works, but like if you go into it knowing certain things, it's like, wait a minute, what this makes sense. It's just like there are things that just on a replay, some things just don't really make any sense. But as a whole, like, this is something that I feel like stands up as one of my favorite games and something that like I'll always, always, always look back on fondly. This is one of my all-time favorites. And of course, at number 1, we have the all-time GO. One of the most important pieces of media in my life, Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, a game that has kind of redefined how I look at the world and what I want out of a video game, and something that really raised the bar. This is a game that went completely under the radar when it first came out, but in the decades since, not only has the Fire Emblem IP exploded and become super popular, this game is now seen as one of the all-time GOATs. And that is something that I'm very proud to be a part of. You know, I've always been an advocate for this being seen as the all-time great Fire Emblem game. And I think a big reason for that is because it perfectly mends together like modern and classic FE. You know, it does have the well-rounded, fleshed out characters that later games would have while still retaining the hardcore permadeath system of classic FEs. This is a system that is probably never going to come back. So to see it utilized so well here is very, very interesting, and I think truly demonstrates just how interesting of a mechanic it actually is. It's outdated and obsolete by today's standards because of what Fire Emblem turned into and what they focus on these days, but at the time, it was truly a novel idea, and this was the culmination of that concept. Map is unique with its own unique focus and feel, with its own unique mechanics and objectives. Unlike modern FE, in which you typically have to just kind of defeat everyone on a map, like this one has a variety of objectives that force you to take advantage of your vast array of units in very unique ways. And a lot of your best units aren't very good initially. So you kind of have to stick with them and keep using them so they can become viable. It's a very interesting system, one that I feel like modern FE has kind of lost. And on top of all that, the story is very interesting with very well-rounded characters, like very good moments, like a lot of variety in what can happen, especially in the early game, considering that like a lot of plot critical characters early on can die. It's very, very interesting to see like how much replay value this game has. If you're interested in the setting of the or the characters at all, you're going to be wanting to play through the game over and over again. And I can guarantee you, because of how many hidden secrets are in this game, like you're going to find out more about the plot and the characters, and even how to get some of the hidden characters that you didn't know about on your first playthrough. It is shocking how, coming back to this game after so long, how complex it is and how it keeps you endlessly entertained. This game has one problem. It is very specifically the fact that it ends on a cliffhanger and the sequel isn't nearly as good. It has more contrived characters. It kind of like drops the ball when it comes to certain things. Some of the reveals don't make a whole lot of sense, but on the other hand, a lot of them make way too much sense. Radiant Dawn is not a bad sequel at all, but it doesn't come anywhere near the level of quality that I was expecting from the follow-up to this game. And that is kind of a shame, but the simple fact of the matter is, like, Path of Radiance being as good as it is and I do think writing it off because of something like that, of a sequel not living up to expectations, is that's just very unfair to what this game accomplished. This game kind of is a symbol of what's going to happen with a lot of these lower performing Nintendo properties, because for a long time, Fire Emblem was not a title that even was released in America. For a long time, this was thought of as a series that would never ever get any traction here whatsoever because of how uniquely Japanese it is. And today, it's a cultural phenomenon and one of Nintendo's biggest IPs. So I think it's a testament to just how Nintendo can rapidly grow a franchise in a relatively short amount of time. Games like this simply don't need to sell millions of copies right out of the gate. This is something that's getting a lot of people's attention simply by releasing on a subscription service 20 years after release. This is something that I think a lot of people look back on fondly, and as a result of that, became enthusiasts and wanted to see more from it. And that eventually led to the success of Fire Emblem Awakening and led to where Fire Emblem is now. And this is something that could very easily happen to any of these smaller Nintendo properties. And that's something that I think a lot of people need to keep in mind. Like, this is the exact thing that happened to the Gamecube. It was initially very unpopular, and then it evolved into the Nintendo Wii and dominated not only the console generation, but the console war. Thank you for watching.